A retired black officer finally finds peace until a trespasser turns his backyard into a battleground and targets his beloved dog. Will he let it slide, or will justice be served? It was a beautiful summer afternoon in Ohio. The sun cast long golden streaks across Jaden Phillips's backyard, reflecting off the crystal-clear water of his swimming pool. The air was warm, carrying the distant hum of cicadas and the occasional laughter of children playing on the next street over. It was the kind of peace Jaden had worked for, had earned after 15 years on the police force. He leaned back in his lounge chair, a glass of iced tea resting on the small table beside him. His dog, Leo, lay curled at his feet. Jaden closed his eyes, letting the warmth seep into his skin. Then came the sirens. The sharp wail cut through the tranquility, slicing the air with urgency. Jaden's eyes snapped open. He sat up just as two patrol cars screeched to a stop in front of his house, their red and blue lights flashing. Officers stepped out, hands hovering near their holsters. "Sir, we received a report about a suspicious individual trespassing in this pool area." Jaden felt a familiar tension coil in his stomach, one he hadn't felt since the days of patrolling dangerous streets. He exhaled slowly, steadying himself before rising to his feet. He knew exactly who had made that call. Through the corner of his eye, he spotted Harper Thompson, standing behind the sheer white curtains of her second-floor window. Even from a distance, he could see the self-satisfied smirk on her lips. She had done this before, but this time, Jaden promised himself, it would be the last. 2 months earlier, from the moment Jaden stepped through the front door, he knew this was the home he'd been searching for. The spacious rooms, the polished wooden floors, the backyard with its lush green lawn and an inviting pool. It was more than just a house. It was a sanctuary. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe he was finally home. More importantly, it was a place for Leo. Jaden had adopted Leo, a small, scrappy poodle mix, from a local animal shelter a month before moving in. The dog had been abandoned, left trembling in a cold metal cage. But the moment Jaden opened that door, Leo had leapt into his arms as if he had been waiting for him all along. "You're home now, buddy," Jaden had whispered into his fur. For Jaden, Leo wasn't just a pet. He was family. Every afternoon after unpacking another set of boxes, Jaden would sit by the pool and watch Leo chase his favorite rubber ball, his little paws kicking up bits of grass as he ran. Jaden would chuckle, sipping on a cold beer, feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time. Contentment. That feeling didn't last long. 1 week after moving in, Jaden returned from the grocery store to find the gate to his backyard slightly ajar. His pulse quickened. He wasn't expecting visitors. Carefully, he set the bags down on the kitchen counter and walked towards the back door, his instincts kicking in. What he saw made him stop in his tracks. A woman reclined by his pool, sipping a glass of wine, as if she'd been living there for years. Her designer swimsuit clung to her slim frame, and a wide-brimmed sun hat shielded her eyes. A luxury towel was draped over one of Jaden's patio chairs. Jaden's fingers curled into fists. He took a deep breath and stepped onto the patio. "Excuse me," he said, his voice even. "Can I help you?" The woman, Harper Thompson, tilted her head, pushing her sunglasses up onto her forehead. She regarded him for a moment before waving a dismissive hand. "Oh, don't mind me," she said breezily. "I don't need the pool service today." Jaden frowned. "I'm not the pool service." Harper arched an eyebrow, a hint of skepticism in her expression. "Then who are you?" Jaden folded his arms. "I'm the new owner of this house." For a split second, something flickered in Harper's eyes, something sharp, something calculating. Then she laughed, a small, condescending chuckle, as if he had just told a ridiculous joke. "You?" she said. looking him up and down. "The owner?" Jaden's jaw tightened. He had heard that tone before, had seen that same disbelief in the eyes of people who had underestimated him. "Yes," he said firmly. "I am." Harper pursed her lips, tapping a manicured finger against the rim of her glass. "That's strange," she mused. "The realtor never mentioned—" She waved her hand vaguely. "Well, you know." Jaden knew exactly what she meant. There was no mistake. He had signed the papers. He had paid for this house. He belonged here. Harper, however, did not. "This is private property," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I'd appreciate it if you asked permission before entering my yard." Harper's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, lighten up," she said, waving a hand. "The previous owners let me use their pool all the time. It's practically a neighborhood tradition." Jaden held her gaze. "Not anymore." For a long moment, Harper didn't move. The air between them grew taut, an invisible battle waged in silence. Then, with a theatrical sigh, she stood, gathering her belongings. "Fine," she said, slipping her sandals on. But as she passed him, she murmured under her breath, just loud enough for him to hear, "We'll see about that." It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. And Jaden knew, in that moment, that his peaceful days in this neighborhood were numbered. At first, it was just her. Jaden would check his security cameras in the evening and see Harper slipping into his backyard, moving with the casual entitlement. She would lounge by the pool, sip wine from a crystal glass, and occasionally dip her feet into the water. Sometimes she would even take a swim, her golden hair fanning out around her like a queen in her private oasis. She acted as if the property belonged to her. Jaden had confronted her twice. The first time, she barely looked up from her magazine, dismissing him with a lazy wave of her hand. "Oh, relax," she had said. "It's just a pool." The second time, she smiled, that same slow, condescending smirk. "Do you know who my husband golfs with?" "Captain Reeves," she had added, as if that explained everything. "I'm sure the police would love to hear about how aggressive you're being." Jaden had seen this before. The veiled threats, the unspoken rules that people like Harper thought they could bend at will. He knew better than to lose his temper. So he had simply walked away. But that night, he had installed a full set of security cameras around his property. And that was when the real violations started. The footage didn't surprise him. It only confirmed what he already knew. There was Harper, standing by his back gate at dusk, trying an old key. When it didn't work, she frowned, jiggling the handle as if she had every right to be there. There she was again, strolling through his garden, plucking a tomato from the vine, examining it with distaste before tossing it onto the grass. And then, one morning, Jaden woke to the sound of laughter and splashing. When he stepped outside, his patience snapped. Harper had brought guests. 4 elegantly dressed women lounged in his patio chairs, sipping mimosas. The sun glinted off their oversized sunglasses, their carefree laughter filling the air. Harper floated on a pool raft, her arms stretched lazily over the sides. "Ladies," she said, her voice carrying across the yard, "our little secret, huh?" Jaden's presence did not startle them. Harper barely turned her head. "Oh, don't be so dramatic," she sighed, waving a hand. "We're just having a bit of fun." Jaden took a deep breath, keeping his voice steady. "You need to leave. Now." One of the women, a brunette with too many pearls around her neck, shifted uncomfortably. "Harper said you were okay with this," she murmured. "Harper," Jaden said, his patience razor-thin, "does not own this house." The woman immediately stood, mumbling something about a misunderstanding. The others hesitated, looking between Harper and Jaden, uncertain for the first time. But Harper remained unmoved. She simply adjusted her sunglasses, took a slow sip of her drink, and smirked. "Go ahead," she murmured, voice dripping with amusement. "Call the police. Let's see how that works out for you." Jaden didn't call. Not yet. He had dealt with people like her before. People who wielded their social status like a weapon, who could twist a situation until the victim became the aggressor. He knew the game she was playing, so he let them leave. But that night, he tightened security. And Harper? She wasn't done. At the next neighborhood meeting, she made her move. "I just think we should talk about safety," she began, her voice filled with faux concern. "I mean, with everything happening these days, we really need to be mindful of who is bringing dangerous elements into our community." She never said Jaden's name. She didn't have to. A few heads turned toward him, subtle but noticeable. Jaden kept his expression neutral. "I heard," Harper continued, lowering her voice conspiratorially, "that someone in this very neighborhood owns firearms." A gasp. "Now, I don't want to make accusations, but shouldn't we be asking questions?" Jaden clenched his jaw. He knew in their eyes he was a black man owns a gun. Dangerous. The conversation meandered into whispers, stolen glances, a few nods. That's how people like Harper operated, sowing just enough doubt, planting just enough fear. But not everyone was buying it. On his way home, Jaden was approached by a black couple, Jameson and his wife, Camille. "Don't let her get to you," Jameson said, his voice low but firm. "She's been pulling this nonsense since we moved in 2 years ago." Camille nodded. "She tried to get the HOA to fine us for our unapproved front door color, claimed it didn't fit the aesthetic. But really, she just didn't like that we were here." Jaden exhaled, tension draining from his shoulders for the first time that night. He had assumed he was alone in this. He wasn't. The moment Jaden stepped into his backyard, he knew something was wrong. The air was eerily still. No eager paws scratching against the patio, no excited bark greeting him at the door. The usual whirlwind of energy that was Leo was nowhere to be seen. A chill ran down Jaden's spine. He set his grocery bags down on the counter, his heart pounding harder with each passing second. "Leo?" His voice was steady, but his hands had already curled into fists. "Buddy, where are you?" Silence. Jaden's stomach twisted. He hurried outside, scanning the yard. His gaze darted to the pool, the patio, the shaded spot under the oak tree where Leo loved to nap. Nothing. Then, near the poolside, a small, unmoving shape caught his eye. His breath hitched. Leo lay crumpled on the grass, his body unnaturally still. Jaden ran. He dropped to his knees, hands shaking as he reached for his dog. Leo whimpered weakly at the touch, his small body trembling, his breath shallow and ragged. "No, no, no," Jaden murmured, his voice breaking. His fingers skimmed over Leo's side, and that was when he felt it, swelling along his ribs, the unnatural angle of his leg. Jaden didn't stop to think. He scooped the dog into his arms and rushed to his truck, driving like a madman to the emergency vet. The whole way there, he whispered reassurances, his voice barely steady. "You're gonna be okay, buddy." His grip on the wheel tightened. "Just hold on." But deep down, fear clawed at his chest. The waiting room was cold, too quiet. Jaden sat hunched forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the linoleum floor. Leo was in surgery. The vet's words echoed in his mind. Broken leg, internal bleeding, severe trauma. Jaden had seen people survive gunshot wounds with less damage than this. And the worst part? This wasn't an accident. Someone had done this. Someone had hurt his dog. The thought made his blood turn ice cold. The moment Jaden returned home, he went straight to his security system. His fingers trembled with fury as he rewound the footage, heart hammering against his ribs. Then he saw it. The moment his world shifted. Harper and 4 of her friends strutting through his backyard like they owned the place, laughing, drinking from expensive glasses, tossing their shoes aside. Then Leo appeared. The little dog ran toward them barking, not in aggression, but in confusion. He was small, but he was fearless. He was protecting his home, the only way he knew how. But Harper didn't see a beloved pet. She didn't see a loyal companion. She saw an inconvenience. She turned, grabbed a wooden pool skimmer from the patio, and, without hesitation, brought it down. Leo yelped in pain. He stumbled back, his tiny frame shuddering. But Harper wasn't finished. She hit him again and again, until he collapsed. Jaden barely heard the sound of his own breathing. His ears were ringing, his pulse roaring in his skull. Harper had done this, and her friends. They laughed as if it was some kind of joke. Jaden's vision blurred. This wasn't about trespassing anymore. It wasn't about stolen newspapers or HOA complaints. This was cruelty, and it would not go unanswered. Jaden took a slow breath, his hands clenching into fists. Harper had crossed a line she could never step back from. Jaden inhaled slowly. It was time. Harper wanted to play games, then he would give her a game she wouldn't forget. Jaden sat in his dimly lit office, fingers tapping against the wooden desk. His eyes, dark with exhaustion and quiet fury, remained fixed on the computer screen. The security footage played again and again. Harper and her friends, laughing, drinking, and then the sickening moment when she raised that wooden stick. The moment Leo's tiny body crumpled to the ground. His peace, his privacy. And now she had hurt the only family he had left. This wasn't just about getting even, it was about making sure she never did this to anyone again. And Jaden had the perfect plan. He remembered a case from years ago. A group of vandals had targeted a wealthy homeowner, sneaking into his property at night and throwing pool dye into the water. The trick? The dye was completely invisible until it reacted with certain chemicals, specifically high-end sunscreens and luxury cosmetics. Harmless, temporary. Jaden did his research carefully. He ordered the exact brand, tested a small sample in a bucket with a few drops of premium sunscreen, just like the kind Harper and her friends used. The result was perfect. A bright, unmistakable green that would take at least a week to fade naturally. Not harmful, not permanent, just devastatingly embarrassing. A few days later, Jameson stopped by. His teenage daughter, who went to school with Harper's son, had overheard some interesting gossip. "She's planning another pool party," Jameson said, shaking his head. "She told people you'd be out of town this weekend." Jaden's lips curled into a slow, knowing smile. He prepared meticulously. He installed 3 extra cameras at different angles, ensuring he would capture every single moment from multiple perspectives. Then, late at night, he carefully poured the dye into the pool, making sure it was evenly distributed. To anyone looking, the water appeared crystal clear, inviting. By Saturday morning, everything was in place. Jaden packed his car and drove off, just far enough for Harper to see. But instead of leaving, he circled back, slipping into his office, where he had a direct view of the backyard cameras. And then he waited. Right on schedule, Harper arrived. She strolled through the back gate like she owned the place, followed by 6 of her closest friends. Their expensive beach bags dangled from their manicured hands. their sunglasses perched perfectly atop their noses. "Ladies," Harper purred, raising her wineglass, "welcome to our little sanctuary." Laughter filled the air. They spread out their towels, set up a Bluetooth speaker, and sipped their champagne. Then, one by one, they slipped into the water, blissfully unaware of the carefully laid trap waiting for them. For the first few minutes, everything seemed normal. Then it began. It was Susan who noticed it first. "Harper," she murmured, frowning at her arm, "is your skin different?" Harper rolled her eyes. "What are you talking about?" Then she looked down. Her fingers stiffened around her champagne flute. A shriek tore from her throat. Her hands were green, a deep, unnatural, alien shade of green. Panic erupted. Susan's face twisted in horror as she clawed at her skin. "Oh my God, it won't come off." One by one, the women scrambled out of the pool, dripping, their designer swimsuits clinging to their now emerald-tinted bodies. The harsh sunlight only made the color more vibrant. "My daughter's wedding is next week," one of them wailed, staring at her reflection in her phone's front camera. Her mascara had streaked down her cheeks, only now it was green. Harper stumbled to her towel, gasping. Her normally bronzed complexion had transformed into a grotesque shade of lime. "This isn't happening," she whispered, her breath hitching. But it was. It was happening. The scene was pure chaos. The women grabbed their belongings and bolted, their green-tinted bodies streaking across the neighborhood. One of them tripped over a flower pot. Another left behind an expensive scarf in her hurry. Jaden watched it all unfold from his office chair, Leo curled up in his lap. He could hear their screams through the open window. The security footage was even better than he'd imagined. Harper's initial confidence, the slow dawning horror, the pure, unfiltered humiliation. He sat back, scratching Leo behind the ears. Then, with methodical precision, he edited the video. A little slow motion here. A perfectly timed zoom in there. And for the finishing touch, he added a soundtrack, the exact jazz music Harper had played during her unauthorized pool parties. That night, he uploaded the video. By morning, it had gone viral. The internet was merciless. By the time Harper realized what had happened, it was already too late. The video, clear, crisp, and unforgiving, spread like wildfire across social media. It started with neighborhood gossip, a few amused comments on the community forum. Then someone uploaded it to a larger page, and within hours, it was everywhere. Entitled, "Woman Trespasses and Gets a Taste of Karma. Real estate agent turns into the Hulk, literally. Harper Thompson, the Green Monster of Ohio." The footage was brutal in its honesty. It started with her smugly striding into Jaden's backyard, sunglasses perched atop her nose, the ringleader of an afternoon pool party that had no business existing. It showed her and her friends dipping into the clear blue water, blissfully unaware of what awaited them. And then, the moment of truth. The screams, the frantic scrubbing, the horrified realization that their skin, their meticulously maintained, pampered skin, had turned a brilliant shade of green. The internet had seen its fair share of entitled people getting their comeuppance, but this was something special. People looped her shriek, slowed it down, edited it to music. Within hours, TikTok was flooded with remixes. Someone spliced the footage into a scene from The Wizard of Oz, timing her panic perfectly with the Wicked Witch melting. And the memes, oh, the memes. One showed her standing at the pool's edge, a caption reading, "When you try to steal someone's backyard, but end up starring in Shrek 5. Another had her glaring at the camera, skin still faintly green, with the words, Harper's next real estate listing. Swamp properties only. Jaden watched it all unfold with quiet amusement. He hadn't needed to do anything after posting the footage. The world had handled it for him. The fallout didn't stop at social media. Within days, the real estate company where Harper worked found itself under siege. Clients flooded their Facebook page with green emoji comments, questioning whether they could trust an agent who blatantly trespassed on private property. "Do you do home tours or just move in uninvited?" One person snarked. Another wrote, "Thinking of selling my house, but only if Harper doesn't touch it." The company scrambled to contain the damage. At first, they ignored the controversy. Then, as the backlash grew, they attempted damage control. Finally, when the pressure became unbearable, they issued a formal statement. "We uphold the highest standards of professionalism. The actions of one individual do not reflect our company's values." Harper was on her own. By the end of the week, her bio had quietly disappeared from the company's website. Desperate to salvage what little dignity she had left, Harper did what entitled people often did when faced with consequences. She sued. She claimed Jaden had intentionally humiliated her, that he had violated her privacy, that his petty prank had ruined her reputation and caused emotional distress. Jaden barely batted an eye. His lawyer responded with cold efficiency, presenting undeniable evidence. Footage of Harper trespassing, vandalizing his property, even attacking Leo. The case didn't even make it past the preliminary hearing. Harper's own lawyer must have realized how ridiculous it was, because soon after, they withdrew the suit. But the damage had been done, not to Jaden, to her. She had exposed herself as a bitter, entitled woman who refused to take responsibility for her actions. Her last shred of credibility vanished. And then, finally, the inevitable happened. The for sale sign went up. No official announcement, no dramatic farewell. Just a quiet, reluctant acknowledgement that she could no longer live here. Harper Thompson was leaving. The change was almost immediate. With Harper gone, the neighborhood felt different, lighter. The air carried a new kind of ease, as if an invisible weight had been lifted. For the first time in years, people stopped looking over their shoulders, stopped whispering in hushed voices about who might be next on Harper's list. There were no more HOA complaints about Christmas decorations being too bright or lawns being unkempt, despite their perfect green symmetry. No more thinly veiled comments about who did or didn't fit into the community. People started to relax. At the next neighborhood meeting, Jaden noticed it immediately. The usual stiffness was gone. Conversations were casual, decisions were made without Harper steering the discussion toward her own agenda. What once felt like a courtroom now felt like a gathering of neighbors. And the best part, no one was afraid to speak anymore. Harper's absence had done something powerful. It had reminded them that they weren't powerless. A month later, a moving truck pulled up in front of Harper's old house. Jaden watched from his porch as the new family arrived. A young couple, Matt and Lisa, stepped out first, stretching after the long drive. Then, two identical little girls tumbled out of the back seat, their laughter ringing through the quiet street. Within days, they had settled in. Lisa was the first to introduce herself at the mailbox, her handshake firm and warm. "We're just happy to be somewhere welcoming," she said, with an easy smile. And for the first time, Jaden could honestly say, yes, this neighborhood was finally becoming that place. His backyard, once a place of quiet solitude, had transformed into something else entirely. The pool, once a battleground for control, was now a centerpiece of the community. Children splashed and played on summer afternoons. Parents gathered by the grill, sharing stories and laughter. The first time Jayden had agreed to host a small cookout, he had expected only a handful of neighbors. But word had spread, and soon his backyard was filled with faces, some familiar, some new. People who had once kept their distance were now sharing plates of barbecue and toasting cold drinks under the string lights. And Leo, stronger, healthier now, was in the middle of it all, weaving between guests, tail wagging. Jayden sat back, watching it unfold, the soft murmur of conversation mixing with the sound of water and crackling flames. This was what a community was supposed to feel like. One evening, as Jayden was cleaning up after a long day, he heard a knock at his door. Standing on his porch were Jameson and Camille, a bottle of wine in Jameson's hand, a warm but serious expression on his face. Jayden stepped aside to let them in, but before he could say a word, Camille pulled him into a tight hug. "We owe you a thank you," she said softly. Jayden shook his head. "You don't owe me anything." Jameson let out a quiet chuckle. "No, we do," he said. "For a long time, we just put up with it. The little digs, the subtle exclusions, the way she made it clear some of us weren't really welcome here." He sighed, shaking his head. "But you stood up to her. And because of that, things are different now." Jayden exhaled, feeling something settle in his chest. He had spent so much time focused on getting through the fight, he hadn't really thought about what it meant. Not just for him, for all of them. As the night stretched on, the three of them sat on the porch, sharing stories, clinking glasses, and watching as the lights from the houses around them flickered gently in the dark. For the first time since he moved in, Jayden felt at peace. No battles left to fight, no lines left to draw, just home. A year had passed. The seasons had come and gone, painting the neighborhood in shades of gold, then white, then green again. The days were quieter now, filled with laughter that no longer carried undertones of tension. The air was lighter, free from the weight of unspoken fears. This was how a community was supposed to feel, and yet life had a way of reminding him that some things, some people, never truly changed. That morning, an email had landed in Jayden's inbox. The sender was an old colleague, someone he hadn't spoken to in a while, but who still knew how to find him when something interesting crossed their desk. "Though you'd appreciate this," the message read, followed by a link to a local news article. Jayden had clicked, curiosity piqued, and there she was. Harper Thompson, a different state, a different neighborhood, but the same story. The article detailed how Harper had been stirring up trouble with her new neighbors. This time, her battleground was a private tennis court belonging to a young couple. She had stormed into a community meeting, voice dripping with self-righteous indignation, demanding access under the pretense that the previous residents had always shared it with her. Jayden could almost hear her voice as he read, that same entitled lilt, that same unshakable belief that rules applied to everyone but her. He shook his head, letting out a short, amused breath. Some people never learned. But that was no longer his problem. Jayden closed the email, set his phone aside, and leaned back in his chair. The breeze carried the scent of freshly grilled ribs and the faint sound of a jazz record playing from someone's speaker. He took a sip of his lemonade, savoring the crisp tang on his tongue. He didn't care what Harper was doing now. Not anymore. The poolside gathering carried on as the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the lawn. Neighbors moved with an ease that had once seemed impossible, their bonds strengthened not by shared grievances, but by a newfound sense of belonging. Jaden glanced toward the side of his house, where a single framed photo still hung. A keepsake, a reminder. It captured the exact moment Harper and her friends had fled his pool in sheer panic, their skin a vibrant shade of green, leaving wet footprints across the pavement as they scrambled for cover. Their expensive swimsuits, their carefully styled hair, ruined. It was ridiculous, hilarious, but more than that, it was proof. Proof that justice didn't always require a fight. Sometimes karma just needed a little nudge. Jaden let his eyes linger on the image for a moment longer before turning back to the celebration unfolding around him. The past no longer weighed on his shoulders. Harper's name no longer carried power here. His home was finally his own. And that, my friends, is the beauty of karma. Sometimes it doesn't need a fight. Sometimes all it takes is patience, a little creativity, and the confidence to stand your ground. It's a reminder that when faced with people like Harper, people who manipulate, bully, and feel untouchable, the best response isn't always confrontation. Sometimes the most satisfying revenge is simply watching them unravel under the weight of their own entitlement. And if you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more tales of karma and justice, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. Until next time, stay smart, stay kind, and remember, sometimes the best payback is letting the universe do its thing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.